One of the most famous internet memes addresses the debate over whether Nazism is left wing or right wing. It's the biscuit or cookie debate for adults. But the internet is like that. Once we post a video here, people are free to comment whatever they want, because in reality, everyone can interpret history as they wish. And today, we will talk about perhaps the most controversial historical interpretation, whether Nazism was left wing or right wing. It's important to remember that this subject is very controversial. This discussion is not common in Germany, and also doesn't receive much attention elsewhere in the world, nor is it extensively debated in academic circles. It's almost a consensus among historians and experts that Nazism presented itself as an extreme right-wing movement. But it's common for individuals to interpret history in the way they believe is most convenient. There have even been instances of Americans trying to teach German history to Germans, in the same way that a few years ago, someone tried to explain the meaning of Pink Floyd lyrics to Roger Waters, the composer of Pink Floyd's lyrics. But if this is almost a consensus, why do so many people argue that it is a left-wing movement? It's because of the interpretation of Nazi speeches and practices in the 1920s and 1930s. You see, the National Socialist German Workers' Party, the famous Nazi Party, was founded in February 1920, emerging from a nucleus of the German Workers' Party. It was a period of political instability in Germany, and the financial crisis that ensued after World War I was devastating. With all the political instability that was happening, Nazism presented ideas that appealed to those who were not satisfied with the direction German politics was taking. Hitler was an excellent speaker and knew how to say what the people wanted to hear. In times of difficulty, people tend to become interested in politics and defend what they believe is best for themselves and also for the collective. In 1917, the Russian Revolution had begun with a Marxist socialist bias from the left, being responsible for the creation of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics in 1922. And many Germans argued that left-wing socialism would be a good idea for the country, an idea that was fought against by the leader of the Nazi Party in Germany, Adolf Hitler. Hitler was born in the Austro-Hungarian Empire and fought alongside the Germans in World War I. He attempted to seize power in Germany in the event known as the Beer Hall Putsch, which failed and ended with him imprisoned. It was during his imprisonment that he wrote the book Mein Kampf, which translated means My Struggle, a book easily found on the internet. Within this book, we have contact with much of Hitler's thinking that led to the actions of the Nazis. And it's the actions of the party and what it advocates that we must take into account when we try to debate whether it is a left-wing or right-wing party. Because there are many people who classify Nazism as a left-wing movement because of its name, National Socialist German Workers' Party. Some argue that just having the word socialist in the name already defines the party's ideology. But that is also a mistake because we know that the People's Republic of Korea, which is North Korea, is not popular, just as East Germany, which had the official name of the German Democratic Republic, was not democratic. What we mean by this is that the name doesn't mean absolutely anything. This type of name was used to please the masses and attract the working classes. Hitler was not a socialist, at least not in the definition of the term. He argued that socialism was the science of dealing with the common good, and that the communists had distorted the concept of socialism. So what he had to do was take socialism away from the socialists, making his socialism a national socialism. Socialism is usually related to the ideas of the German philosopher Karl Marx, who gave rise to Marxism, a movement that addressed various points, from class struggle and labor relations in society to the exploitation of the worker by those who owned the means of production. Those who advocated Marxist thought wanted to unite revolutions worldwide, like the one Lenin led in Russia. However, Hitler was a great critic of Marxism. He did not advocate for a revolution uniting the world, but rather for the defense of nationalism within Germany and an ultra-conservative government. In his book, he even said that Marxism was irrational and that he and Judaism were the great dangers Germans faced. But Hitler didn't just criticize Marxism and socialism. He was also a great critic of capitalism. Both left-wing movements and the Nazis criticized capitalism. So when someone says that Nazism has similarities with the left, it's because it does. But that also does not classify the Nazi movement within the left wing. Despite the criticisms that socialism made of capitalism also being made by the Nazis, this does not make them allied parties. Hitler laughed when Nazis were confused with Marxists. Nazism opposed the growing left-wing movements in Germany and was characterized by the pursuit of the destruction of Marxism. At the time, members of the Communist Party and the Social Democrats, who were from the left, were persecuted by the Nazis and even murdered. What is important to make clear to the viewer is that our intention is not to defend any type of government. What we seek is to read and interpret historical material, just as most interested parties should do, rather than just seeking confirmation bias. One of the historians who speaks most about this is Ian Kershaw, one of the world's leading authorities on German history, and all of this is corroborated in the extensive bibliography he has produced. There is no shortage of study material to support the political positioning of Nazism. There are specialists who very well defend the idea that Nazism was neither a right-wing nor a left-wing party, a fact very difficult to fit into either side. They advocate for a third way for those people who were not satisfied with the right-wing parties, which were losing more and more representation in German politics, nor with the left-wing parties, which spent the 1920s in power and could not solve Germany's problems. We try to extend many of the arguments that lead people to associate Nazism and communism, for example, because they had similarities, such as their authoritarian governments and strong state control. But it is necessary to understand that extremes end up having these similarities, where there were left-wing governments, such as that instituted by Pol Pot in Cambodia, a government with strong state control, like Stalin's Soviet Union, and there were also governments where the state took control of everything that was public and even of people's private lives, and they were openly right-wing, such as some dictatorships in South America. Nazism was opposed to liberalism indeed, and advocated for strong state intervention. But there are those who argue that this is because Hitler believed that liberal capitalism was in the hands of the Jews, whom he credited with the major national problems. Hitler did not preach the destruction of capitalism in the same way that he preached the destruction of Marxism. He only wanted to take this power away from Jewish hands and put it into the hands of the state. He did not intend to abolish private property and put the people in control of the means of production. When we analyze all the facts, the main idea ends up leading Nazism a little more to the right wing than the left wing. Of course, this does not mean that a person who considers themselves right-wing is a Nazi, just as a left-wing person is not a supporter of Stalin's government in the Soviet Union. Absolutely no one wants to be associated with these groups. The truth is that both are full of ramifications. Right and left diverge greatly. It's not possible to just put right and left in two separate bags. What's important is to pay attention to all the facts before drawing any conclusions. There are indeed left-wing circles that support governments like Venezuela, but we cannot say that the entire left supports what happens there, or that it does not view with disdain what happened in Pol Pot's Cambodia or in Stalin's Soviet Union. Likewise, people on the right will never support Hitler's Nazism or Pinochet's dictatorship. Germany does not hide this past from anyone and acknowledges that it made a huge mistake during that time. Of course, disagreements about the classification of Nazism can be found especially in contemporary political contexts, where different groups have their own interests and interpretations of history. In the end, the debate over the political classification of Nazism remains complex and controversial, and it's important to address it with a solid understanding of the historical and political context. It's crucial to analyze not only superficial appearances, such as the name of the party, but also its ideologies, actions, and historical impacts. Ultimately, history cannot be reduced to a question of biscuits or cookies. It requires careful analysis and nuance to fully understand past events and movements. If you enjoyed our channel, please subscribe and give us a like. so we can reach more people who enjoy learning and understanding about the various subjects of our immense planet Earth. We appreciate your visit here, and until the next video,